right, so as you can hear, everybody is excited about cryptography, which is great because we're excited about cryptography as well.
Yeah.
We've got a great panel for you today, and we're going to be talking through a whole bunch of different things, but we'll start with everybody introducing themselves. You've heard me, so let's move on to Richard.
Richard Kisley from IBM, and so I'm the HSM architect there. I also contribute to standards at PCI through various avenues, and then X9 and ISO.
Joachim Vance, Chief Security Architect at Verifone. I get to play with cryptography, and I have a lot of fun doing it. And I'm also, I guess I'm representing IBM today. This is one of the quantum chandeliers, one of the quantum computers that IBM produces. So like a representation of.
Not nerdy at all.
I'm Jillian Benedick. I work at Utimaco. I'm a cryptographer, mostly working on Atalla HSM.
I'm Stephen Bowles. I'm the Regional Security Officer with Ingenico here in North America. I also chair ANSI X9's work group on data information security.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we're going to be talking a lot around cryptography, but there's probably going to be a bit of a focus around quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography. So I'll ask Joachim to start to give us a bit of an introduction of what is that, what does it mean for the folks in the audience who may not know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, a lot of the discussions that we have, it can be overly technical and not really understand why it is that we're talking about what we're talking about and what the issues are, right? So a lot of you have heard of a quantum computer, and maybe you don't understand why it's a risk or what provides the risk. So the difference is, in a classical computer, you have bits, ones and zeros. A quantum computer has qubits, which are ones and zeros and kind of everything in between. Maybe a way to think of it is, you flip a coin, you get a heads or a tails. But if you spin the coin, you're not sure if it's going to be heads or tails at any given point, right? And so what that turns quantum computers into is very good at doing predictive analysis. So you can do materials science, you can do chemistry, biology, you can do predict, best paths or good, travel, paths and things like that. But you can also do things like predict what the key might be and factor RSA or ECC keys. That does take a very large quantum computer. One of the discussions I think we need to have is how soon do we think that'll happen? Sometimes it's called a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, or CRQC. And that's kind of the risk is there's an algorithm called Shor's algorithm that could pretty quickly attack RSA or ECC keys and factor them and break them so they become useless.
Okay, so let's start with that in terms of the threat that these pose. So Joachim was mentioning that these quantum computers can be used to attack certain types of algorithms, including RSA. And there's actually a paper that came out recently that talked about the fact that it moved the number of qubits, the number of quantum bits that exist or are required to do this from 20 million down to 1 million, which is a big drop. Are we going to continue to see that sort of drop? Are we going to, over time, not only see quantum computers getting better and bigger, but also the need that's required, the size required to break this cryptography to go down? And can I start with you on that, Richard?
So yes, you can start.
Excellent, thank you.
So yes, I think that number will go down, although I'm not a mathematician at that level, so I will yield to you on that one. But I think that the number of quantum bits that you're going to need, so that is noisy qubits, that paper.
Correct, yeah.
And the time prediction, I think, for that 1 million qubit answer was 1 week. And so I think RSA factoring was 3n qubits, logical qubits. And I think elliptic curve was 6n. And that results in a quantum computer of roughly the same size for those two.
Okay.
And we have another question coming up later about when that is, so I'll reserve my answer about when that break is predicted.
Got to leave the audience in anticipation.
Yeah. But I do think that the quantum computers are on an engineering path versus a theoretical, maybe someday path. And I think the algorithm improvements will be coming along as well.
Excellent, interesting. And so, Jillian, you've been name-checked here, so what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it will continue to drop. This last speed up was due to both factoring speed ups and error correction. So I think we will continue to see both things get better over time. I don't think it really matters by how much. I think, like Richard was saying, the time it takes is the most important. I think there's two big questions. Will RSA 2048 be broken? Eventually, yes. And what is the risk to fielded systems? And can it break fielded systems already? And I think once we see it demonstrated theoretically, we'll start doing more risk calculations on how long it will take and the value of your keys and when you need to work towards changing those algorithms that will be broken.
OK, thank you. Steve, I'm going to come to you with a question. You've been in the payment industry for just a couple of years now, I would say. We've seen the change from single DES for triple DES. People who are old as I am can remember, we did that changeover. And we still have, single DES stuck around for a while, let's say. Are we going to see, if we migrate and when we migrate to better algorithms than triple DES, are we going to see a long tail of triple DES still existing in the market?
I think the conversation is going to be very consistent with what we've had previously, in the sense of moving to from single DES to triple DES. We didn't rush with that, and we found mitigations by using things like duckput to make it harder to break those weaker keys. We've done the same sort of thing with triple DES to AES, and I think it's going to be the same sort of conversation with do we move to quantum algorithms and where? And that's probably the bigger question from a threat risk assessment is where are the risks due to these things? I'm doubtful as to how much risk there is in the transaction path from the point of interaction back to the host gateway. But once you get into the gateway area and the processing environment where you have aggregation of data, where you have big volumes of value to the hacker community, that's where you're going to see this sort of attack hit first, and where when we're thinking about agility in our infrastructures, whether it be crypto agility, whether it be infrastructure agility, we've got to go through that threat risk assessment and focus on applying the changes to those higher risk elements first. And the path from the POI to the gateway, to me, is a lower threat.
OK, interesting.
But don't you think? Oh, sorry.
No, please go on.
So don't you think some of the techniques, though, would be helpful there? I mean, a static key system is not going to be that quantum resistant, right? Because over time, the value that key protects will grow. So even though maybe it's not a gateway that's being attacked, the volume of transactions that can be attacked and the number of people that can be attacked because of the time aggregation will grow if static keys are used. So that pushes me towards more of a zero trust architecture or framework for protecting those systems where you still see elliptic curve or RSA.
Oh, absolutely. I think the implementations, we'll probably talk about those a little bit more, are going to be hybrid. Right? It's going to be a mix of things, and there are going to be specific areas where making use of some of the signature algorithms or other things like that may be practical and appropriate for those organizations. But data encryption of small data sets will probably be using, triple DES will hopefully start disappearing soon. And I'm very hopeful that it'll be AES that we'll be relying on for some time yet to do that kind of transactional data encryption.
I think there's an interesting question there, though, right? Like you just pointed out, here we are, 2025, and how many people have AES deployed in their payment infrastructures, right? And I agree with you 100%. Like I think we have to look at where is RSA and ECC being used. We talked last year about inventory. That was the kind of the name of the game. But are we going to get to the point where we say, oh, well, payment terminals, they're kind of unique for key per device and in the use of RSA and ECC keys, and maybe that's not going to get attacked because, in the 1 million qubit theoretical computer, it's going to take a week to attack, so we're not going to attack those, we're going to attack the central ones, and so, yeah, nobody should worry about their payment terminals. There might be some accuracy there, but at the same time, does that cause us to delay things that we should advance in, and when we can do it, like start to replace where we use RSA and ECC and payment terminals in the HSMs now? I get concerned about that. We're still stuck with triple DES, and we should have all moved to AES. And there's a lot of reasons why we haven't, but part of it is lack of pressure, and that we haven't kind of moved forward as an industry together and say, hey, we have individuals moving forward one at a time, but there's no real reason to move forward together. I think we need to kind of understand, yeah, we absolutely need to address the risk, but we should figure out how do we move forward together rather than say, oh, we can keep those guys to the side. They're not going to be attacked. I don't like that.
Okay, so
Yeah, there's going to be this crazy future where all the devices support AES, but nobody's got it turned on.
I mean, today. That's what it is today.
And that's exactly, I think, the mistake that we've made so far, is that all of the focus, when we went from single DES to triple DES and now triple DES to AES, the focus was on the endpoint. That's where, and there wasn't enough, there weren't mandates, there weren't things that forced the back end to change. And really, I think when we do talk about this change in moving to post-quantum cryptography and the protections against that, we almost have to do it in the reverse order. Be more concerned about those processing, and not saying that we don't have to worry about and we don't have to do the endpoints, but the endpoints in some ways are have the lowest threat. There's a threat, but it's a lower threat. We've got to focus on the back end. We've got to make sure that those centralized systems, where technologies like IBM Grace with the HSMs and all of that, that those are the places where we're focusing our early efforts while we get there. Because for the most part, the endpoints are ready. We just haven't closer to being ready, but we just need to talk about firmware updates. We need to talk about key distribution and key updates and how to do that in a way that's there. But it's the back-end systems because of the money that it's going to take to actually do those back-end systems.
So Jillian, as the cryptographer on the panel, we're just amateurs here. We're talking about triple DES and AES and ECC and RSA, and there's lots of acronyms. Do quantum computers, and does the risk of a cryptographically relevant quantum computer apply equally to all of those algorithms, or is there a difference?
No, the asymmetric algorithms are more at risk. I think we need to focus on moving to PQC and AES kind of at the same time, since we're late on moving to AES. We should have already done that. But the asymmetric algorithms are going to be broken first. AES 128, 256 is kind of debatable within the community, which is going to be the safest against quantum computer if 128 is enough, or if we need to really move to 256. And I think it depends on where in the system it is, right? I think your top-level keys absolutely should be at AES 256, but some of the other lower transaction keys can remain at AES 128 and still be secure for a really long time. Everybody's been mentioning crypto agility, and so I think it's interesting because there was this big push to move from RSA to ECC, and we, again, kind of missed that. A lot of people have not made that move. And now moving from ECC to PQC is actually harder because ECC keys are a lot smaller. Their ciphertexts are a lot smaller. And PQC keys are very, very large. And so I think moving to a hybrid scheme or pure PQC at this point from RSA is probably the way to go. I don't think it makes sense now to go from RSA to ECC and then to a hybrid or PQC model.
Okay. So, Stephen, you mentioned that last year we had a similar panel, and we talked about the fact that people need to have started going through their systems, looking at where they use cryptography, starting to do that accounting so that they can figure out, as you say, where are the high-risk systems we need to attack first as opposed to others. What's your feel of how that's gone? It's been a year. Have people moved along that path, do you think?
To a certain degree. I think different organizations are at different level of maturities as far as this go. I mean, I think the good question is a lot of you folks out there are at least asking the question. Because I've had a lot more conversations with my customers this calendar year as opposed to last calendar year about migration from triple DES to AES, about what it means to adopt post-quantum cryptography and the risks and all of that sort of stuff, and conversations about what's in the way, what things are blocking, and what things need to be moved on. So have we done enough yet? No, I don't think so. But people are starting to think about these issues a lot more seriously. They're asking the right questions, and I think it's keep those conversations happening. Keep challenging your service providers and your vendors to guide you as best they can.
Okay, interesting. Richard, so we're talking about post-quantum here and migrating to AES and potentially post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. There's a lot of focus on crypto agility and so forth. Are we doing that to the detriment of something else? Is there something else that we should also be keeping an eye on in cryptography and key management whilst we're making these changes, or is that the primary focus right now?
The change to PQC.
Yeah.
So I think it's to the detriment of moving to AES.
Interesting.
But so I hesitate. So another one of the things we were going to talk about is what's next, and I wrote there but okay, it was a terrible Western joke. I was going to say, whoa. I mean, we still need to move, as we've said, from TDES to AES. And one of the other examples was key blocks, and I'm not sure key blocks is completely rolled out everywhere. I think we still get questions. The PCI still gets questions about key blocks, so that rollout isn't complete. The move to PQC is people are starting inventories, and I agree with Stephen that you're seeing people start inventories, and some people have a few of their systems transitioning, but the PQC algorithms were just standardized a year ago, so they're not built into places where people can use them for their applications yet. So what's next? I would like to see crypto agility as what's next, where we start to define protocols so that they're agile instead of dependent on certain algorithms at certain strengths. So I do think that agility is hopefully what's next.
Okay, Stephen, you.
Yeah, and I think there's certainly a number of issues that are important. Like, it's good that we're talking about PQC and all these kinds of things because it is a long conversation. But we can't lose sight of the fact that things like we need evolution in things like TLS. We need to be looking at our infrastructure as much as you were talking about agility, is do we have estate management solutions out there that allow us to help maintain that inventory, that allow us to push out firmware updates, or to do remote key loading for migration as we go. These are the kinds of things that we need to kind of, building the roads and the highways before we start worrying about putting up the buildings and stuff of these PQC solutions and implementations. We've got to make sure that there are ways to make those updates easily, because as a lot of people have talked about, we've got big estates of thousands, millions of devices that at some point are going to have to be updated, and the prospect of replacement is a brutal, costly prospect. I mean, as a vendor, I'd love for y'all to sell your stuff and buy more of mine, but that's not realistic at the same time. So we have to worry about putting in place mechanisms that allow to take that existing infrastructure and lift it up.
That's a good point, I think. And to Joachim, what should people also be doing, when they're going through this process of migrating to AES or PQC? Either, you might as well do this other thing as well so you don't have to do it later. Is there anything along those lines?
That's a good point. I think the over-focus on PQC is still, there's not a lot to do yet. I mean, I think that the challenge is, it depends on the industry you're talking to. Like, I've talked to some industries, and they're like gung-ho trying to run and figure out how to use some of the algorithms, although they're still running ahead of some of the standards. We're still seeing standards still playing catch-up in ITF. There's still a little bit of ways to go. In X9, there's still a little ways to go. We'll probably see another year cycle before we see PQC in all the standards where we need them. So right now, it's still about maintaining inventory. In the meantime, I think we need to stop doing bad things. I still see organizations trying to invent new protocols when they don't need to invent them, or trying to use protocols in a way that they shouldn't be. I've seen multiple instances of regions around the world trying to use RSA OAEP, which is a great encryption algorithm, to do key transfer, so unauthenticated, so in a way that could be spoofed. We're even using RSA for just data encryption. I know there's a lot of organizations that like to do that, but at the same time, it's like if you're doing public key encryption from your endpoint devices, they can be spoofed. So I think we need to look at, like, how do we do proper end-to-end security that's authenticated and encrypted? How do we implement TLS in a way that's for data protection as a defense in depth, but not saying, oh, we're going to use that as the sole method of data protection? Encrypt your data and use TLS. I mean, we need to be using systems together properly and building them the right way. So it's good to go back and look at our systems and go, maybe we didn't do that one right, and that's an opportunity to, as we build the solution correctly and then also prepare for PQC, we can correct some of the mistakes so that we're ready for moving to PQC as well.
So, Jillian, we had somebody mention, I forget who it was, the fact that these, I think it might have been Richard, these post-quantum algorithms ratified by NIST, they've only been around for about a year, thereabouts, give or take. How much confidence do you think people can place in those algorithms at this point, and what can people do to help mitigate the risk of that?
Yeah, I think NIST did an extensive review with experts on the algorithms, but they are all pretty new. They're not the types of algorithms that we've used in the past, like AES and triple DES, the key block or the block algorithms. So lattice algorithms are relatively new for cryptography. I think a lot of people still have doubts about it. So if you're in that bunch, then you should probably move to hybrid first, pair it with ECC, and then you kind of still have the strength of ECC until quantum computers at least come around, should these algorithms be broken before we get a quantum computer. And then when we do, then you're still safe as long as the algorithm has not been broken yet. So I think you see two buckets of people, the people that have full faith and want to go full PQC, and the people that want to go hybrid. And I think, yeah, it just depends on your implementation and your own trust. I personally trust them, so I would go full, but
okay.
I think other people have different stances.
Anybody else have any points of view on this?
I think you should hedge your bets. I'm a full fan of hybrid for a bunch of different reasons. One is that then you have the confidence of, like, you're getting the security strength that you're going to get now, ahead of PQC or a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. But then you're also preparing yourself for using, and hybrid means, we should explain some of our terms, but hybrid means that you're using a post-quantum cryptography algorithm, that's what PQC means, along with a traditional algorithm like RSA or ECC, an asymmetric algorithm at the same time. And so you're using them together in a way where you get the strength of both together. So if for some reason we have, like tomorrow, IBM invents some crazy technology where they could break RSA, you have your quantum computing or your PQC algorithm that is protecting you. Or if the other conversely is true, if the PQC algorithm falls to a classical attack, somebody figures out how to break it, now you have your ECC algorithm or your RSA algorithm to protect you. So you get the best of both worlds. I think if you use hybrid, you build a stronger system together, and you can easily get rid of one or another later if we have more confidence. I'm a little concerned, like, that NIST has been pushing that we only need PQC, and we're going to do PQC only. The European Commission has said we should do hybrid. So we have some, like, areas around the world where, is it one or the other? I'm concerned a little bit of the NIST push that seems like in some of the federal systems, they'll be saying, if you do hybrid, we don't like it. And so that might start to push for, maybe there'll be a lot of systems that get built that are PQC only. I'm just not sure. I think we're all better off if there's choice. I think hybrid is a good way to go. I'm not unconfident in the PQC algorithms. We just haven't had time with them.
Mm.
I mean, we've seen that the algorithms are solid. I mean, we probably will continue to see or a need to maybe even update some of them to put in new mitigations for new attacks, whether they be side-channeled attacks or others. But I think probably the bigger question right now, at least in my mind, is the usability, especially in the payment space, and how it's going to function with the different operating environments we have. You know, the use of PQC in an HSM in a data center is one thing. Which of these algorithms is going to work best in a low-cost chipset on a point of interaction device is a completely different question. And we're just starting to do those studies now to be able to see how those algorithms work. You know, thankfully, we've got the choice of a handful of signature algorithms to work with. Right now, we've only got one chem to work with. So there's certainly some concern there as to, you know, from a performance perspective, whether or not that's going to give us trouble, or whether or not we've got to take some time to wait for some of the other algorithms that are still being studied, still being challenged and peer-reviewed, and eventually could be standardized.
Yeah, and I think with hybrid, it's going to work great in some places, but the PQC keys are so big that then adding an ECC key or an RSA key into these small spaces is going to be an issue in some places.
I think also that hybrid can be implemented incorrectly. So there are ways to do multiple signatures where the outer signature can be stripped off without impact of the inner package, right? So the hybrid construct has to be correct. And NIST has some guidance, I think, on hybrid chem usage. So if people follow the NIST guidance on hybrid chem usage and then follow some industry standard guidance on which composite signatures or hybrid signature patterns they use, hopefully they'll not stray too far. But I think some of the conversations we've had, people do love to invent their own objects. So just the human inventiveness, bless their heart, there's just so much you can do. Please do try to follow the proper guidance on that.
To that point, just a quick whip round on the panel. Yes or no, should people be inventing their own cryptographic algorithms and modes of operation?
No.
No.
We allowed to say
No one wants to disagree on that one? It's all a no? I think it's all a no.
No.
Okay. So from the, going to ask you this question, Richard. I'm sadly old enough to remember when Triple DES was mainly implemented in software on, you know, in POIs, there's often 8-bit processors, and the speed at which you could do that was really important, and it took a long time. I mean, obviously now we have a lot of these algorithms, at least the symmetric algorithms and some of the asymmetric, baked into the silicon of chips. And as a HSM manufacturer, are we past the point where the speed of cryptographic processing is an issue? Is it still an issue? And what are the post-quantum algorithms going to do to that kind of processing time?
So one limiting factor for these algorithms is the space that they take up in hardware. They do require some room, right? They're not like ASCON where it takes up a significantly smaller footprint than AES, but the PQC algorithms take some room. But with that done, they can be accelerated to comparable speeds. At least the lattice algorithms can be accelerated to comparable speeds to RSA, definitely. Not quite elliptic curve, but definitely comparable to RSA, particularly when you compare bit strengths. Right? Yep. You do RSA 8K or 16K, right? And that's actually comparable bit strength to AES 256 or to Category 5, security Category 5. Nobody's going to do that. It's so slow that nobody would do that, but that's the comparable bit strength. So PQC algorithms are better there. They're just not where, you know, like you were saying, we got so lucky with ECC that we're not that lucky on the PQC algorithms yet.
Yep. You mentioned ASCON. So ASCON, for those who aren't familiar, is what's referred to as a lightweight cryptography standard. It was recently ratified by NIST, and it's designed to be essentially smaller in hardware, take up smaller memory footprint than AES does. It's a symmetric algorithm. To the panel here, is there any utility in ASCON that we might see in payments, or is everywhere where you might use it in payments, you're better off using AES? I'm going to open that up and see who jumps in first.
Well, I'll finish what I was saying before.
Okay,
so I was
sorry.
going to say you can optimize the cycles, and then I paused too long, but you can optimize
Went right in there.
the cycle processing time for the algorithm, but you can't optimize the size of the objects or for storage or for transmission. So the PQC keys or ciphertext or signatures, depending on the algorithm, are so much larger. It's hard to optimize that out. You're going to see a noticeable impact if you're transferring them a lot. And hopefully you build systems and protocols where that's amortized properly. And then for ASCON, people are talking about it. I'll talk about it from the standards perspective, but I'm thinking people are saying, okay, we'll allow it, but use cases aren't turning up right now.
Okay, anybody else?
I think it's a distraction. For our industry specifically, there's no value in using that over AES. Right? I don't think there's any situation that I can think of in the next 10 years where any of those ASCOM algorithms, this lightweight cryptography, it's symmetric key only, it's not asymmetric key. It was designed by NIST as a contest for very specific purposes. A lot of really cool things came out of it. They're also AES 128-bit only, or 128-bit security strength only, which is also an interesting side effect of it.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think, unless we're talking about like some super small memory devices is built into like our fingernails or something like that can't handle AES, I'm really not sure. I think you could even do from your earpods, like I think you could do AES. So I don't think using AES is going to be a problem, especially in our industry.
I mean, one of the benefits that we have in our use cases is that we're not trying to do things in nanoseconds or microseconds. We're talking about transactions that, the user experience of bringing your card or whatever your payment credential is and packing your groceries and doing all that, it's all measured in seconds. And we're effectively using AES today in many operations with our customers, and it's not impacting the cardholder experience, which I think is the measure. Absolutely fantastic use cases in IoT for ASCON, but I can't see us in the payment industry except, unless there's kind of new technologies that are limited memory and other stuff like that aren't kind of mainstream yet. Maybe, but for the most part, I think there's, AES is well established as far from a usability perspective. It's just that adoption part that we've got to hit.
Okay. So we've been talking through a lot of acronyms, a lot of jargon, I would say, which requires a lot of background knowledge. I think there's probably people in the audience who are sitting there wishing that they'd spent more time in lunch rather than coming in here because it's all a little bit confusing. To Jillian, if you're new to this industry, if you're new to cryptography, what do you think is the best way for people to skill up and learn what they need to learn?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of great blogs out there by cryptographers that they can make use of. I think not reading the standards aren't going to help you if you don't understand cryptography. It's just going to confuse you more. If you're interested in actually getting into cryptography, I think there are some good YouTube channels. There are some great classes. I would say find a mentor that is into cryptography because you'll learn more from them, especially how it's implemented in your industry, far more than you'll learn from anywhere else.
Excellent, thank you. Any others?
Perhaps not just about cryptography, but I think in talking about one of the things we haven't talked about enough about on this panel is key management. And key management isn't all about technology. It is definitely the part of what we do that definitely pulls in the people and process sides of things. So, in your companies, if you do have cryptographic functions and stuff like that, one of the best ways to start getting into that kind of spot is volunteer to be a key custodian for your company. We're begging for people to do key custodian activities. It's hard to find people to do it, but it really gives you insight into the processes and rigor that you have to go through to actually protect key material in the clear as you manage all of these devices. So it's a fantastic way of getting your foot in the door to start understanding kind of what's going on. Then you can get deeper into trying to build out, whether it's a deeper understanding of cryptography.
So it's interesting you raise that from a key management point of view. And I asked the question, how do people learn about cryptography? But perhaps I should ask a different question. do people in the payments industry in general, for most people, do they need to know about cryptography, or are they better off knowing about key management and just knowing that these are the algorithms that I should use? So back to you, Steve.
I think definitely the learning more about key management, the process of that is far more critical in understanding that relative to the minutia of cryptography itself.
I agree. I think if you don't have strong key management, your cryptography is useless.
Yep.
The secrecy of the keys is the most important thing. So,
Anybody else?
So one thing I was just going to add was you haven't mentioned the PCI cryptography guidance document as a source of education about cryptography. But it actually, I was re-reviewing it just this week, and I was kind of surprised. It actually has a lot of really good, wasn't surprised.
I was going to say surprised.
It has a lot of really good content in there, including about PQC, post-quantum cryptography. I think there's some really good guidance in there as a base. So, as a document, there's some, as a guidance document, it also teaches a lot about key management, security strengths, basics of cryptography. There's a lot of good in there as a core. I think we'd be remiss by not also saying what everybody's already doing for other technologies is ask your AI, your favorite AI, right? And honestly, I've been finding that I will say that 6 months ago, I was asking questions that I obviously knew the answer to, and it was kind of off. And in the last 2 to 3 months, it's giving me answers that I'm like, oh, this is like exactly what I go ask from a cryptographic intern. Like he could give me, this, or she could give me these answers. So I think there's a lot of really good that's coming out of like AI as a tool for understanding the issues, right? Maybe not necessarily implementing cryptography, because we're not asking anybody to do that. But if you're trying to learn about key management or best practices for key management within PCI, if you ask ChatGPT, you're going to get great answers, and it's a good way to like be able to answer more specific questions. But you can also talk to any of us.
Yeah, we're around. So
I was going to step in on that one.
please do, yeah.
Right. So you mentioned volunteering to be a key custodian. I think another area where you will see PQC start to be adopted more readily in the next year is object signing, code signing, or either firmware or software signing or message signing. So that is another place in most enterprises, most businesses that do development where you can get involved and help out with a process that has cryptography associated with it.
So you mentioned firmware signing, and I'll spin around on that very quickly in terms of, I can't remember who it was once again, but somebody mentioned the fact that with the post-quantum algorithms, they're not as easy to embed into silicon. Actually, I think it was you. They're just bigger, essentially. And so more resource intensive, let's say, in silicon. Given that when normally people are signing firmware that's going on to chips, processors, devices, physical things, they're using RSA, they're using ECC, they're using these asymmetric algorithms which are open to attack from post-quantum computers or quantum computers. How do we address that? When are we going to start to see chips that have firmware that is able to be signed by post-quantum algorithms? I don't know whether anybody has an opinion on this.
I do. I think this is one of the areas that I think is the hardest to do and hardest to get, because everything else you can get, as far as doing PQC in software, in systems, in the back end, even in HSMs, we're going to see that's going to be readily available in the next couple of years. It already is in some cases. You can play with open source software tools that can get you the ability to kind of play around with it. Different organizations even have the ability to get PQC-related certificates. So MLDSA signed certificates. Those are available today to play around with and test. But I think at the bootloader level, that's where we're going to find it very difficult. I had a conversation earlier today with Qualcomm just about that, and they're definitely working on it. And I know that the NIST type of EU type of programs are going to start to push for organizations to build it into your iPhone, Android phone, your network gear, your PC, your laptop. I mean, these are all at risk from that kind of thing, and it's a great place for a nation state or somebody with a desire to attack RSA or ECC. You're going to attack the bootloader key so that you have the ability to then replace whatever software you want at that very low level. So it's very important that we get to there, but it's also something that I think the industry as a whole is going to take advantage of. Organizations like Qualcomm, building that at the chip level, and they're doing it. It'll just maybe take a little bit longer than we think, but maybe not as long as we're worried about. So it'll happen.
I mean, we've got some standardization to do. You know, we've got algorithms now. We've got some samples. If anybody saw the presentation by Jeff Stapleton and Ralph Poor earlier this week, there is an X9 root CA that can issue certificates, but we still have standardization to do on certificate format. We still have standardization to do on key management of PQC keys. All of this stuff is work to be done. So there's places where we can start actively experimenting, but we've got standardization that needs to be done before things become production.
Okay. I'm probably going to transition now into a few quick questions. I'm going to start off with some number questions. And so what I want you to do is, don't do it yet, on your hand, once I've asked this question, then I'll say go later on, I'll ask a question, and then I want you to give me a number between 1 and 5, where 1 is very unlikely and 5 is highly likely. Okay, we got it? 1 unlikely, 5 highly likely. You can go in between if you like. So let me get my question. On that scale, what is the likelihood of RSA 1024-bit being factorized either by a quantum computer or by a traditional computer within the next 10 years? Between now and 2035, factorization, go. That's very likely, by the way, just to give people a reminder of that.
I keep thinking about Joachim's fingernail computers.
Okay, same question, or similar question, I guess, except now RSA 2048, same Tara period, 25, within the next 10 years to 2035, what's the likelihood? Okay, not quite as confident across the panel, but once again, that's within the next 10 years. Our panel of experts here expect to see some sort of break, some sort of factorization, let's say, of an RSA 2048 bit.
Can I just make a quick comment? The reason I'm so low is that I think 1024 is at the edge.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like high.
But then you just double it and you get 2048.
Yeah, I think they'll be within a short period of time they'll be broken.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You think it'll just kind of be dominoes, and once it goes, it goes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've seen, okay, we haven't talked about this, but I don't think we've seen that is linear. It's slowing down. Like the quantum coherence is like still a factor. The scalability is going to get there. It's really interesting. But like today, like a lot of us would have thought that like a 100-bit or maybe 200-bit like RSA key has been factored, and the largest number that has been legitimately factored by Shor's algorithm, which is the algorithm that breaks it using a quantum computer, is the number 21.
Yep.
And all the other ones that are out there, I even thought 35 was the largest number. So like, really the number 21 is the largest number that has been factored. So I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that we can't accelerate, but we have a little ways to go.
I do think we have ways to go, but I think the estimate for a quantum computer is 2030, 2035, and that's in that 10-year period.
Yeah.
So
That assumes the attack on 24.8 is a quantum attack and not a classical attack.
I'm 100% with you there, too. I think it's more risk. There's probably more risk from a classical attack, meaning not quantum computer, because as some of the cryptographic experts have really talked about, like RSA and ECC, they're theoretically safe, but there's still some issues that are coming up that we're going to see some potential attacks against them. So I am concerned about that, too.
Okay, so another quick thing here then. One is classical computer. 5 is quantum computer. 1024 by 2035, which is going to be factorized. What is it going to be factorized by, a classical computer or a quantum computer? It's a 2. I don't know whether you...
one or the other.
So somewhere in between. So once again, just because we've been talking about quantum computing doesn't mean that's the only thing you need to worry about, is what I'm hearing with that. The art, the science of cryptanalysis is continuing to move forward. It is something that develops over time, and these algorithms are potentially at risk. I think you wanted to say something at one point there, Richard? No. Okay.
So I do. Just the answer to that is the answer is the same. You do to post-quantum, cryptographic algorithms, right? So, or post-quantum cryptography to protect against those those breaks, whether it's a classical break or a quantum break. The answer is still the same. You still will need to move to PQC. So I think we're still moving in the same direction. It doesn't really matter which breaks it.
Okay.
So the IBM quantum roadmap has a full logical qubit at the by the end of next year.
Okay.
And then there's a progression into hundreds of qubits in the next couple of years after that.
Wow.
So I do think 2035 is where RSA 1024 is, and then 2048 would be probably a couple years after that. But that's using the current number of qubits that we expect. So if that gets reduced, then the window moves in.
And that's kind of where we started in terms of we're already seeing one side of it in terms of how many qubits you need go down, and we're seeing the computers get better and the roadmap become more clear, let's say. It's interesting. I'm going to end with one final question, the most important question of the whole panel. Star Wars or Star Trek? Stephen.
Love the fact that they didn't overdo it with a Galaxy Quest, but I'm more of a mythology person, so I'll say Star Wars.
Yeah, original Star Wars.
A fella's got to wonder across the whole verse, and we're in San Antonio, you didn't say Firefly.
Oh, yes. That wasn't an option.
There's a deep cut for you.
I'm gonna go Star Trek because of Star Wars, the later episodes, 8 and 9. I think they went off the rails a little bit. So,
And/or pulled it back.
Yeah.
and/or brought it back. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'd like everybody to thank my panel. I've had a great time here. I hope you've had a great time. Hopefully you've learned something. And thank you very much to my panel. Thank you.
Thank you.